And we are back with the fourth segment of the GSMC basketball podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this fourth segment, I'm going to be talking about Harden or Wade, the debate between these two shooting guards. It's a pretty popular debate, but I wanted to talk about it recently just because Evan Fournier, he recently tweeted something that I thought was rather interesting to think about, and interesting for you guys to think about when we want to talk about perspectives and things of that nature. And so I might as well, I'm sure we all remember, or we all know who each of these two players are, but in case for those of you guys who don't, I'm going to go ahead and just give a little synopsis. So D Wade, he was a shooting guard for the Miami Heat. At the time, it was argued that he was one of the best shooting guards, for his time. The debate was between him and Kobe Bryant. And the thing that was really separating him and Kobe Bryant are MVPs. And that's, to this day, is the only thing that's really separating Wade from Kobe in terms of accomplishments in their NBA career, right? And D Wade, he retired. He's played for several teams. He played for Miami. He played more popularly for Miami because that was where he won the 3 titles. He also played for Chicago. He played for a little bit in Cleveland before then getting traded to Miami right back after that. And for the majority of D Wade's career, a lot of people remember him for his plays on the Miami Heat, and a lot of nostalgic NBA fans remember him for when he was on the Bulls for a little bit, and how, because the story behind it is that D Wade is from Chicago, that's the place where he's from, and being able to play from where he's from is it's a heartwarming thing. So that's one of the reasons why he's a bit of a fan favorite over there. And then there's James Harden's career, which wasn't really stouted with as many championships as D Wade's, but similar to D Wade's career, he's been, stouted as the best shooting guard for the time. And for his prime, from 2013, primarily his time in Houston, there was no debate on whether or not he was the best shooting guard in the NBA. He was by far the best shooting guard in the NBA, and it was no question about it. And it was only up until recently with his literally, it was only up until recently where people started questioning on whether or not James Harden is a top shooting guard in the NBA, and whether or not he was even considered a shooting guard in the NBA anymore. Because one of the things that sort of differentiated, I guess you could say, James Harden's progressions to D Wade's progressions in the NBA was that Harden progressed into, he started as a shooting guard, a pure shooting guard, but then he progressed into what seemed to be more of a point guard, a ball handler and distributing the ball kind of player, not so much just a primary scorer. Whereas D Wade was mainly the team's primary scorer. He would have possessions here and there where he would, isolate and do things with the ball, but nowhere near as much as James Harden would end up doing in the latter part of his career with Houston. And that also brings up, the question, is Harden a point guard all time? Is Harden a shooting guard all time? But a lot of people consider him a shooting guard, and they consider him all time to be a shooting guard, and they just say that he brings the ball up a lot because that was the offensive system that they ran. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. Now, where was I going with this? that's the ultimate question when you're rambling. Where am I going with this? But anyways, that's really the differences between their game and how they were able to progress. And so because of the fact that James Harden has been able to do everything for his offenses, you see him on the court 9 times out of 10 he does everything. A lot of people are quick to, point him as one of the best shooting guards in NBA history. And he's definitely top 5. There's no question about him being in the top 5, in my opinion. You can definitely put him in the top 5 without a problem. And it's really when you put him over Dwyane Wade where everybody has the big problem. And the big reason why a lot of people have that problem with people putting James Harden over D Wade is because of the championship difference between D Wade and James Harden. Like, sure, you can argue that James Harden had the regular season MVP, which is something that Dwyane Wade has never been able to do in his entire career, despite the fact that of how good of a shooting guard he actually is. Like, when you think about it, all of the good shooting guards, aside from him, have an MVP on their resume, but he doesn't have one. And so a lot of people are like questioning how can you label him as a top 3 shooting guard ever if he doesn't even have an MVP on his resume, right? That's where the argument sort of comes in. And so, like, it's interesting because it's like, where would you put them? And it's all dependent on whether you value postseason accolades over regular season accolades. And me personally, I value the postseason accolades. It's not just the fact that D Wade has a ring; it's the fact that he has multiple, and the fact that he was the best player on one of those championship teams. Like, all of those reasons are the reason why I think he's better than James Harden, and on top of the fact that he has better defense than Harden. But that's not really a difficult thing to master. And that's one of the things that a lot of people point at when they're comparing D Wade and James Harden in terms of skill on the basketball court. It's the fact that D Wade played much better defense than James Harden did. And while I do agree with that, that isn't really a justifiable reason for somebody being better than another person, because they tried a little bit harder on defense and they played a little bit better on defense. Because if your offensive game is good enough to be able to pick up for lack of a better term, laziness, I don't really see that as a big of a deal. But other people have different opinions on that. So Evan Fournier, he says that he's one of those people that has James Harden over D Wade. The list goes MJ, Kobe, pretty standard, and then it goes James Harden, then D Wade, and then Iverson. Somebody responded to him saying, "You've played both, so you're probably right," which is honestly like the best kind of answer that you can give, because yes, Evan Fournier did play both Harden and D Wade, so he is probably right. But for the person tweeting this, he would have Wade over Harden, not on offensive qualities, but on an overall level. And Evan Fournier said, "I understand. I think that if Harden doesn't fall on the Golden State Warriors cheat code team for 3 years, he ends up an NBA champion, and then we talk about him differently." Which is very, very interesting how that perspective is put into place when we're talking about James Harden, but we don't bring it up when we talk about LeBron. And that's the perspective that I was talking about from the beginning. But aside from that, I mean, he does make a valid point. I mean, if James Harden didn't run into the Golden State Warriors and their OP Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, Klay Thompson, and Draymond Green lineup, their overpowered lineup, then chances are Harden would advance to the finals, and Harden would probably win a championship and arguably win a finals MVP for the Houston Rockets. Again, this was all a big if on whether or not he would be able to actually do that. I personally don't think he would do that, but I do like the perspective that Evan Fournier brings in this conversation. Just the fact that he feels that if the Golden State Warriors weren't so overpowered back then a lot of people would look at his career a little bit differently, which I really, really like because it helps my LeBron case. But on this, I'll elaborate on the LeBron case a little bit more, but on this case in particular with the James Harden and winning championships, I don't think he would have won championships even if he was playing for, even if Golden State wasn't such an overpowered lineup, which is why I don't agree with Evan Fournier's take. I agree with the fact that, yes, it is a possibility that he was robbed of titles because of Golden State's overpowered lineup. But do I think he would have won those titles? Absolutely not. I don't think James Harden would have won those titles. Why? Mainly because of his postseason performances. And he has postseason meltdowns every single postseason. I am not lying when I say this, and I'm not exaggerating. In every single postseason, you will find at least one stinker game from James Harden, or one really bad game that ultimately determines the outcome of the entire series. It's every single season. You can look at the box scores, you can look at the game log. It's every single season that he does this. And because of that, I wouldn't rank him higher than D Wade, even because of that reasoning that Evan Fournier gave. However, if we're talking about perspective, then I will gladly use this perspective to argue LeBron being the greatest basketball player of all time. Because Evan Fournier is absolutely right. If Golden State wasn't such an overpowered roster, LeBron would probably sit on more championships right now, and we would see the entire league so much more differently. And the fact that these NBA players agree with the fact that that team was ridiculously overpowered only goes to show that LeBron is the greatest. Period. Done. End of story. No question about it. But aside from the jokes, that's my opinions and why I personally don't think Harden is better than D Wade. But let me know in the comments what you guys think of the overall debate between Harden and D Wade. Who do you think is better? Do you have Harden or do you have D Wade? Let me know in the comments. But aside from that, we are going to go ahead and go into the fifth and the final segment where I continue on with my list of the players who I feel like don't deserve the MVP. So we stopped at 1978, I believe. So now we're moving down and farther from the timeline now. So I'll be right back after this short break, and be sure to stay tuned.